Welcome to another episode of Spotlight Murder by Scoob. Today, I am your host, Kieran Caldwell, and today we're examining one of the most devastating murders in music history, the killing of Selena Quintanilla, the beloved queen of Tejano music, at the hands of someone she trusted most. This is a story that goes beyond celebrity tragedy. It's about betrayal, manipulation, and the deadly consequences of unchecked greed. On March 31st, 1995, the world lost a shining star when 23-year-old Selena Quintanilla was gunned down by Yolanda Saldivar, the president of her fan club and manager of her boutiques. But this wasn't a random act of violence or a crime of passion in the traditional sense. This was the culmination of months of financial fraud, psychological manipulation, and warning signs that tragically weren't heeded in time. Over the next hour, we'll unpack the complex web of events that led to this tragedy, from Selena's meteoric rise to fame, to the red flags surrounding Yolanda's behavior, to the calculated deception that lured Selena to her death, and finally, to the dramatic trial that captivated a nation. So settle in, because this story has layers that run much deeper than what made the headlines. To understand the magnitude of what was lost on that March day in 1995, we need to understand who Selena Quintanilla really was. Born on April 16, 1971, in Lake Jackson, Texas, Selena wasn't just another pop star. She was a cultural phenomenon who broke barriers and built bridges between communities. Selena showed musical talent from an incredibly young age, and her family recognized something special. Her father, Abraham Quintanilla Jr., himself a former musician, made the pivotal decision to manage his children's musical careers. He formed a family band called Selena y los Dinos, which included Selena and her siblings. What started as performances at small family gatherings and local events would soon evolve into something much bigger. But here's what made Selena truly revolutionary. She was combining traditional Mexican sounds with modern pop and R&B influences, creating a sound that appealed to a massive, diverse audience. She sang primarily in Spanish and became one of the first female Tejano artists to achieve massive popularity in what was, let's be honest, a heavily male-dominated genre. For those unfamiliar, Tejano music is this beautiful blend of Mexican, European, and American musical styles that's especially popular in Texas. It's complex, it's rhythmic, and it was the perfect vehicle for Selena's incredible voice and charismatic stage presence. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, Selena's success just kept building. She released several successful albums, won the Tejano Music Award for Female Vocalist of the Year multiple years running, and songs like Como La Flor, Amor Prohibido, and Bidi Bidi, Bom Bom became anthems that are still beloved today. But Selena's ambitions extended far beyond music. She was also a talented fashion designer who launched her own clothing boutiques. Her unique style and natural beauty made her a fashion icon for young fans, particularly Latina girls, who finally saw someone who looked like them achieving mainstream success. She appeared in magazines, on television, and became a role model and source of inspiration across the United States and beyond. By 1994, Selena was at the absolute peak of her career and was making the highly anticipated crossover into the mainstream English-language music market. She was preparing to release her first English album, which industry insiders predicted would make her a global superstar. The future seemed limitless for this young woman who had already accomplished so much. What made Selena special wasn't just her talent. It was her warmth, her dedication to her fans, and her genuine personality. She often spoke about the importance of family and staying true to one's roots. She wasn't just a star, she was someone who inspired hope and pride in her community. People didn't just admire Selena, they felt connected to her. This connection, this trust, this openness, these beautiful qualities that made Selena so beloved, would also make her vulnerable to the betrayal that was coming. With Selena's empire growing rapidly, she needed trusted people to manage her various business ventures. Enter Yolanda Saldivar, who had started as the president of Selena's fan club. As the fan club's success grew, Selena made what seemed like a logical decision. She promoted Yolanda to oversee her boutiques and formally made her Selena's agent. To handle these new responsibilities, Yolanda relocated from San Antonio to Corpus Christi, Texas, to be closer to Selena and maintain tighter oversight of the boutiques and business operations. On the surface, this looked like smart business, but almost immediately, red flags began appearing. Red flags that tragically were either dismissed or not taken seriously enough. The first major warning sign was Yolanda's management style. Reports from boutique employees painted a picture of someone who created a toxic work environment. She had a disturbing habit of firing or sidelining staff members she personally disliked, regardless of their qualifications or job performance. This wasn't business. This was personal vendetta masquerading as management. Employees felt intimidated, marginalized, and afraid to speak up. But here's the heartbreaking part. When these concerns were brought to Selena, she often dismissed them. Why? Because she trusted Yolanda implicitly. They had developed what Selena believed was a close, genuine relationship, and Yolanda had positioned herself as loyal and dedicated. The second red flag was even more concerning. Yolanda's obsessive need to control financial and administrative affairs. Employees and even family members noticed that she was unusually secretive with records. She was reluctant to share detailed financial reports and wouldn't allow others to review important documents. For a business empire the size of Selena's, this lack of transparency was not just unusual, it was suspicious. Then came the inventory discrepancies. Items would go missing from the boutiques, unaccounted for in sales reports. When employees raised these issues, Yolanda would dismiss or downplay their concerns, always insisting that everything was under control. The boutique's profitability seemed inconsistent. Sales reports didn't match physical inventory or cash flow. A climate of suspicion was building, but no formal action was taken. Perhaps most disturbing was how Yolanda was inserting herself into Selena's personal life. She had become a gatekeeper between Selena and her own family, sometimes limiting access and filtering information. Family members and close friends started noticing that Yolanda was involving herself in personal and professional decisions far beyond her role. Her need to be the sole point of contact raised serious concerns about conflicts of interest and accountability. The fan club finances were also becoming problematic. Complaints started coming in from fans who had paid membership dues but weren't receiving promised newsletters or merchandise. These weren't just customer service issues. They were pointing toward deeper financial irregularities that later investigations would confirm as outright theft. Despite all these accumulating warning signs, Selena's trust in Yolanda remained strong, and this speaks to Yolanda's skill at manipulation. She had an ability to present herself as devoted and loyal, making it difficult for Selena and her family to question her motives openly. Yolanda's charm and manipulation created a complex psychological dynamic that made it nearly impossible for those around Selena to address these red flags effectively. The internal conflicts and operational problems were starting to affect the boutique's performance. Employee morale plummeted, and the once thriving businesses showed signs of serious strain. Yet Selena and her family, caught up in their trust and reliance on Yolanda, hadn't yet grasped the full extent of the problems brewing beneath the surface. What they didn't know was that Yolanda wasn't just mismanaging the business, she was stealing from it. And when that theft was finally discovered, Yolanda would make a desperate, calculated decision that would end in tragedy. By late March 1995, the walls were closing in on Yolanda Saldivar. The financial irregularities could no longer be hidden, and tensions between Yolanda and Selena's family had escalated dramatically. Yolanda was under serious suspicion, her trustworthiness was being questioned, and she knew it was only a matter of time before her embezzlement was fully exposed. What happened next reveals the calculating, desperate mindset of someone who knew she was cornered. On March 26, 1995, Yolanda made a chilling purchase. She bought a .38 caliber revolver. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. This wasn't her first attempt at buying a gun that month. Earlier in March, she had purchased a handgun, but returned it to the store shortly afterward. Think about that for a moment. The initial purchase and return suggest hesitation, maybe second thoughts. But the later acquisition of that .38 revolver indicated something had changed in her mind. She had made a decision. When questioned by the gun store clerk, Yolanda justified her purchase by claiming that as a nurse, she had been threatened by patients' relatives and needed the weapon for protection. It was a lie, but it was convincing enough to complete the sale. The weapon she purchased was a Taurus Model 85 revolver, the same gun that would soon end Selena's life. Just 4 days later, on March 30th, Yolanda checked into a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi. She was setting the stage for what she had planned, but she needed to get Selena there, and she needed a reason that would make Selena come willingly, without suspicion. So Yolanda crafted a lie that she knew would appeal to Selena's caring nature. She called Selena and claimed that she had been raped during a trip to Mexico. This wasn't just any lie. This was a calculated manipulation of Selena's compassion. Yolanda knew that Selena, concerned and trusting as always, would immediately want to help. And it worked. Selena agreed to meet with her at the motel. When Selena arrived the following morning, March 31st, she had one primary objective: to obtain the financial documents that Yolanda had been withholding. These were the documents that would prove the embezzlement, and Selena was determined to get them back. But Yolanda continued her deception, insisting that she needed medical attention for her alleged assault. Selena, still believing Yolanda's rape claim, took her to a hospital for examination. But here's where Yolanda's lie began to unravel. The medical exam did not confirm any assault. There was no evidence of rape because there had been no rape. It had all been an elaborate fabrication to lure Selena to that motel. After the hospital visit, Selena returned to the motel with Yolanda, now more determined than ever to get those documents. She knew something was seriously wrong, and she wasn't going to leave without answers. Looking back at this sequence of events, the deliberate purchase of the firearm, the strategic choice of the motel location, the fabricated rape claim, and even the hospital detour as a stalling tactic, it's clear that Yolanda had orchestrated every step. She had created both the physical setting and the emotional pretext that would bring Selena to that motel room. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a moment of temporary insanity. This was premeditated, calculated, and cold-blooded. Yolanda had laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most tragic and shocking murders in music history. The stage was set. Selena was in that motel room, demanding the truth and the documents. And Yolanda, cornered and desperate, was about to make the decision that would destroy 2 lives and devastate millions of fans around the world. March 31st, 1995, started as what Selena probably thought would be a difficult but necessary confrontation. She had taken Yolanda to the hospital, where the rape examination had revealed no evidence of assault. Yolanda's lie was exposed, and now, back at the Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi, Selena was more determined than ever to get the financial documents that Yolanda had been withholding. At approximately 11:48 a.m., in room 158 of that motel, the confrontation reached its peak. Selena demanded the paperwork that would prove Yolanda's embezzlement. Yolanda, now fully exposed as both a liar and a thief, was backed into a corner with no way out. The argument escalated quickly, with Selena making it clear that their business relationship was over and that there would be consequences for the stolen money. As Selena turned to leave the room, having apparently decided she'd heard enough excuses, Yolanda made the decision that would change everything. She pulled out that .38 caliber revolver she had purchased just 5 days earlier and shot Selena in the back. Let that sink in for a moment. This woman who had claimed to love and admire Selena, who had positioned herself as Selena's biggest supporter and protector, shot her in the back as she was walking away. Despite being critically wounded, Selena's survival instincts kicked in. She managed to flee the motel room and stagger toward the lobby, seeking help. Witnesses later described the horror of seeing this young woman, bloodied and in agonizing pain, desperately trying to reach safety. Selena collapsed in the lobby, but even in her critical condition, she was able to identify Yolanda as her attacker and give motel staff the room number. Think about the clarity of mind that required. Even as she was dying, Selena was making sure that justice would be possible. Motel staff immediately called 911, and employees did what they could to help, applying pressure to Selena's wound and trying to keep her conscious until emergency responders arrived. But the damage was devastating. The bullet had severed a major artery, causing massive internal and external bleeding. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but Selena was already unconscious from blood loss. She was rushed to Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital, where medical personnel fought desperately to save her life. For over an hour, doctors worked to stop the bleeding and stabilize her condition. But at 1:05 p.m., just 2 hours and 17 minutes after being shot, Selena Quintanilla was pronounced dead. The cause was exsanguinating internal and external hemorrhaging. She had simply lost too much blood to survive. Meanwhile, what was Yolanda doing during these crucial moments when Selena was fighting for her life? She wasn't calling for help. She wasn't trying to provide medical assistance, despite being a trained nurse. Instead, she wrapped the gun in a towel and attempted to flee in her vehicle. But the police were already responding to the 911 call from the motel. They quickly intercepted Yolanda, blocking her escape route and triggering what would become a nearly 10-hour standoff. For almost an entire day, Yolanda sat in her vehicle in the motel parking lot, holding the gun to her own head, while police negotiators tried to convince her to surrender peacefully. Throughout this standoff, Yolanda began crafting the story that would become her defense. She claimed the shooting was accidental. She insisted that the gun had discharged while she was gesturing for Selena not to close the door, and maintained that she never intended to harm her. But law enforcement officials and Selena's family immediately met this explanation with deep skepticism. If it had been an accident, why had she tried to flee? Why hadn't she immediately called for medical help? Why had she wrapped the gun in a towel and attempted to escape? Eventually, emotional exhaustion and the persistence of police negotiators convinced Yolanda to surrender without further violence. She was taken into custody, still maintaining her story that the shooting had been accidental, but the damage was done. Selena Quintanilla, the queen of Tejano music, was gone at just 23 years old. A vibrant young woman who had broken barriers, inspired millions, and was on the verge of international superstardom had been silenced forever by someone she had trusted. The news of Selena's death sent shockwaves throughout the Latino community and beyond. Radio stations played her music nonstop. Fans gathered at vigils and memorials. The grief was overwhelming and widespread, testament to how deeply Selena had touched people's lives. But even as the community mourned, questions remained. Was this really an accident, as Yolanda claimed? Or was it cold-blooded murder? Those answers would have to wait for the courtroom. The aftermath of Selena's murder was immediate and intense. People weren't just sad, they were furious. The Latino community, in particular, was absolutely heartbroken that this young talent had been taken from them so violently. Yolanda Saldivar had become one of the most hated people in America virtually overnight. On April 3rd, 1995, just 3 days after the shooting, Yolanda was arraigned on murder charges. And here's what made people even angrier. She pleaded not guilty. Despite the overwhelming evidence, despite the eyewitness accounts, despite the fact that she had literally been caught with the murder weapon, Yolanda was claiming innocence. Her bail was initially set at $100,000, but was later increased to $500,000, reflecting the severity of the charges and the public outrage surrounding the case. The trial was becoming one of the most anticipated legal proceedings in Texas history. During the pre-trial phase, Yolanda's defense team made a strategic decision that was probably smart from a legal standpoint, but didn't help her public image. They argued that she couldn't receive a fair trial in Corpus Christi, Selena's hometown. because the case was too emotionally charged and everyone knew about it. They weren't wrong. This case had captured the attention of the entire Latino community and beyond. After several months of legal wrangling, the court agreed to move the trial to Houston, Texas. While this might have provided a more neutral jury pool, it didn't change the fundamental facts of the case. The trial began on October 11th, 1995, and the defense immediately went with their planned strategy. This was all a tragic accident. According to their version of events, Yolanda had never intended to shoot Selena. The gun had simply gone off accidentally while she was making a gesture. But the prosecution wasn't buying it, and frankly, neither was anyone else who looked at the evidence objectively. The prosecution made several compelling points that completely undermined the accident theory. First, they focused on Yolanda's behavior immediately after the shooting. Think about it logically. If you accidentally shot someone, what would be your first reaction? You'd be panicking, calling 911, trying to provide medical aid. You certainly wouldn't be chasing after the victim and, according to witnesses, calling them names. This point was crucial because Yolanda was a registered nurse. She had medical training and was legally and ethically obligated to provide aid in emergency situations. Instead of helping Selena, she had wrapped the gun in a towel and tried to flee. That's not the behavior of someone who had just caused an accident. That's the behavior of someone who knew exactly what they had done. The prosecution also brought in technical evidence about the weapon itself. The .38 caliber Taurus Model 85 revolver that Yolanda had used required approximately 11 pounds of pressure on the trigger to discharge. This wasn't a hair trigger weapon that could go off with the slightest touch. You had to deliberately and forcefully pull that trigger to make it fire. This technical evidence was devastating to the defense's accident theory. The prosecution argued convincingly that the gun simply could not have gone off unless someone purposely pulled the trigger with significant force. During the trial, the prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditation. They detailed Yolanda's financial crimes, her purchase of the weapon just days before the murder, her elaborate deception to lure Selena to the motel, and her calculated behavior throughout the entire sequence of events. The judge made a crucial decision that would impact the verdict. He ruled that the jury could only consider first-degree murder as the charge. They couldn't opt for lesser charges like manslaughter or negligent homicide. This meant that the jury had to decide whether this was intentional murder or nothing at all. On October 23rd, 1995, after hearing all the evidence and testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. In a case this complex and emotionally charged, many expected the deliberations to take days, maybe even weeks. Instead, the jury returned with their verdict after just 2 hours. 2 hours. Think about that. After reviewing all the evidence, considering all the testimony, and discussing the case among themselves, 12 jurors needed only 2 hours to reach a unanimous decision. The verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Yolanda Saldivar was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. She's currently serving that sentence at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, where she remains to this day. The swift verdict sent a clear message. The jury hadn't believed for 1 second that this was an accident. They saw through Yolanda's manipulation and lies just as clearly as the prosecution had. Justice, while it couldn't bring Selena back, had been served. Thank you for joining this episode. Selena Quintanilla's life was cut tragically short, but her voice, style, and spirit only grew louder, becoming a symbol of cultural pride and resilience for generations. Her family preserved her music, a film introduced her to new fans, and festivals, exhibits, and tributes keep her legacy alive across the world. Want the full, unvarnished story, new interviews, rare recordings, behind-the-scenes moments, and the courtroom details that reshaped how we remember her? We bring you exclusive clips, eyewitness accounts, and expert perspectives in the extended episode that you won't hear anywhere else. Download Scoob app now to get access to the full story. Subscribe, rate, and share. Your support helps preserve these histories. Until next time, honor the music, remember the person, and let stories of courage keep inspiring you.